Great, thank you very much. And what I was trying to say earlier before my coughing fit was that conversation on curation was a really nice dive into some of the things that have already been mentioned here this morning in a little bit more detail. And it's a helpful segue for our discussion, as is some other things that have been mentioned here this morning. We've already, obviously, introduced the concept of this unbundling of ad tech. I talked us through a mad tech sketch that we've done at ExchangeWire, published late last week, which broke down this sort of movement from signal to customized algorithm to activation. So this is an opportunity for us to dive into a bit more detail. I want to let everybody know that we've actually got a Q&A session for this, a Q&A functionality for this panel discussion session. It is in your apps, so if you go into the event app, tap onto the session, there is a Q&A tab in the top right-hand corner, and you can drop your questions into there. I should then get them on this iPad, and we can have a go at trying to answer some of those if we get time. Okay, so kicking off, I want to get a bit of perspective from Camilla and Stephanie on the publisher side on the value of signals and on how publishers are sort of working with their data to make best value of it. I mentioned this specifically in the context of our News International speaker earlier this morning, who talked about how publishers have done everything they possibly can to bring valuable data to the marketplace, and still, much to their dismay, it's not always being used. So let's hear from you first, Camilla, on the value of quality signals and what's happening with publisher data.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are super important both to publishers and hopefully to the buy side as well. I recognise your comment about publishers, I think, being extremely resourceful, because they have had to be. From the Telegraph point of view, you know, every publisher is going to approach it slightly differently, but I think from the Telegraph point of view, we've been on a subscription strategy for a number of years now. That's been really crucial for this. Not only has it brought us closer to our readers and built those relationships, but on the data side, it's meant that we could accrue vast quantities of really valuable, really rich data, but based on a logged-in, identified audience as well. So that's been great, but we've had to build products off the back of that. We've had to take them out to market and allow them to mature as well. So we've been doing a lot in that space. The other thing that we're moving on to a little bit more recently is research and insights, and that's kind of the other side of the data coin. I think that doesn't get as much talked about quite as much, but that's something that we're really actively exploring for our commercial business too.
Yeah, I mean, crucially important for publishers to have this diversified monetization strategy, right? So there's a full suite of products for you to be, you know, activating using your customer data. Stephanie, your role is very much focused on data over at The Independent. So give us a bit of a rundown on the importance of quality signals and what's happening with data within your publishing group.
Yeah, definitely. So similar to the Telegraph, and as you said, diversifying revenue streams. We've spent the last 6 years building out our data and MarTech infrastructure, and that again has enabled us to collect a wealth of information that is unique to us, that we can then package and bundle together to tell a story for our advertisers and our clients, so that they can understand truly who it is that they're targeting. We have been kind of investing and trialling and working out lots of different solutions around clean rooms. We're looking at CDPs, etc., not only so that we can continue to build deep, long-lasting relationships with our own customers, but then being able to productize that for our advertisers. So we've spent a lot of time and a lot of investment in this, and I like the point that you were making earlier around the frustration that, you know, we're so bored about talking about ID matching and kind of the cookieless world and things like that. It's really frustrating for everyone. But it does become a challenge if the publisher, for example, is the only one that's really investing in this space. We need the advertisers to do the same so that we can come together, and then the advertiser can benefit from the wealth of information that we've gleaned over the 6 years we've been building this.
Yeah, fantastic. That's super important. I'm going to now jump to Kush to give us a bit of a buy-side perspective. When you and I talked in the lead up to this, you said that your clients were desperate for good quality data signals and anything that helps them reach their outcomes specifically. Give us a bit of a perspective on what you've just heard from our publisher colleagues.
Yeah, I think what Steph said just there was really important about data telling a story. So when we're looking at data signals, we really need to assess what the key impacts and drivers will be for that. And there's a bunch of data. I think we all agree the volume of data is not the problem here. It's the qualitative impacts that we can drive from utilizing that data that we really need to draw on. So when we're, as agencies, assessing different publishers and different partners, we need to understand where they're getting their data from. Is it privacy compliant and so on? But the next step to that is making it to an actionable, real outcome-driven impact for our clients as well.
Yeah, okay. So let's now move over to the tech side of the coin and have a little bit of a chat about what that actually looks like in reality from a tech platform perspective. Aly, you're in the business of signal aggregation. Could you please walk us through how you are trying to make this happen for publishers and over to the activation layer, and then we'll bring Shane in at the end of that.
Yeah, so I think a really important part from The Independent and the Telegraph is that they have really good data because it's unique, it's consented, it's privacy safe, which is why those signals actually work. For those same reasons, using them in activation in the pipes that have already been created becomes difficult. There's no user ID, or there's problems with throttling, or all the other problems you have with the SSP layer. Now, the SSP, DSP kind of historic layer. Now, the things that work really well in the programmatic ecosystem is adding additional intelligence to that data. So when you kind of take those two things together, you kind of historically have a choice. Either you have really good decisioning technology, or you have really good signals that publishers have. Connecting the two has been the challenge. And that's what unbundling, or kind of putting it all together, is why can't you take what works on a programmatic layer in terms of adding really good intelligence to signals, and then allow publishers to apply it to their data, where then the quality becomes an advantage, right? You're not trying to take the quality down to the lowest common denominator, so it works across all publishers, whether they're premium publishers or MFA sites. You're valuing the fact that it's unique, which creates new challenges, right? And that's what I feel like technology or ad tech is there to do. It's to solve new challenges, right? And so the challenge of you've got high quality data is a huge opportunity, and that's what I think the tech layer has to evolve to find what is valuable and then find solutions for advertisers to access that, versus trying to reverse engineer technology that's built to do something else and make the most of this.
Yeah, okay, so that's super interesting. It very much helps to bring to life quite a lot of the concepts that we've discussed already in panel sessions earlier on, including presentation of some of those mad tech sketches this morning. So I really want to hear what that means to you three. But Shane, talk a bit about how this unfolds on the activation side and what that means to you from an ad tech infrastructure point of view.
Yeah, sure, Rachel. So first of all, it's really refreshing to kind of have a conversation which is positive, that involves publishers and media owners monetizing their data in a way which is evolving and actually making a difference to media buyers, to brands and agencies. I represent a company called Bedrock Platform. We're a DSP. We exist to make deal-based trading and the curated internet more efficient. And so I think it was really interesting listening, for example, to Andre Casale this morning, where he referred to a sort of a redress, a rebalancing of the ecosystem, where platforms are actually playing the roles that they should play. In other words, enabling value-adding partners. And I think you hear a lot about ad tech bloat, which undeniably, yes, there has been a lot of complexity, unnecessarily perhaps, around curation. But I think what we're seeing finally is just a sort of a rebalancing of the trade between the principals, so the actual buyer of media and the media owner. I think we see our role as a sort of an enabler of value-adding partners like Nodals and others who really drive that understanding of what the data is and help marketers make sense of it.
So what does that mean to you guys? Camilla, I'm going to come to you first. I know when we spoke, we talked a lot about how publishers have done everything in their power to monetize their data. What does the concept of sort of a modular tech approach mean to you guys? And also, one of the things you and I discussed was how important it is from your point of view to have more of a direct relationship with the buy side. Does some of this concept of unbundling ad tech take you closer to that desire?
I think so. I think when we spoke, I mentioned that where we have direct conversations with brands, we have those direct relationships, that's where we can do the most as a media owner. That's where we can create bespoke partnerships. We can advise on targeting strategies. We can share our most impactful formats. That's where we're able to do that for brands. So where we have that direct relationship and those really close connections, that's where we can do I think our best work as a media owner. I think with what we're talking about here in unbundling or whatever we want to call it, it's really about bringing the two sides closer together, I think, and sort of rendering that accessibility. I think the challenge that we've got as publishers, it's not about the quality of the data that we have or the products that we've built, because we've done all of that work. I think it's really about the accessibility piece, making it more directly and readily available, perhaps to buyers. And I think leveraging AI and the amazing tools that we now have at our disposal, advances in cloud computing, could be kind of that missing link that helps us to get closer to that in a programmatic space.
Yeah. And Steph, when you and I were talking, you mentioned about how important the flexibility is from your point of view to be able to use things according to what your needs are. So is that what modular or unbundled tech means to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, where we see the best success is where we have that direct relationship. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you need to cut out all of the middlemen, etc., because you still need the infrastructure that's actually going to enable the delivery of the campaign or whatever the activation is. But it enables you to get to the heart of what the desired business outcome is. And you can then frame that within the context of what you have. And you need to be brave to be able to say, do you know what, actually, our customers, who we really value and we have this direct relationship with, are not going to really resonate with your brand, your outcome, or whatever it is. So actually, perhaps we're not the people to invest with. So I think if we can be confident to have those conversations, and there are elements within the tech stack that enable us to have that flexibility to potentially kind of pull on certain levers more than others, it means we will ultimately deliver the best experience for the end customer, which is what we all need to do, and we all expect as individual consumers as well. So I think this gives us a great opportunity. As with any kind of tech evolution, you see these innovations and these kind of like Nodals, like anonymized and others, etc., that I spot a real challenge in the stack and can kind of innovate and really drive that. So we go through these cycles all the time, and that is why I love this industry, because it keeps us on our toes, and it means that we can focus on how do we deliver the best for the end customer, and what does the investment need to be able to drive that. The other thing that I would add to that is an element around tech debt. So this is obviously a big thing for the likes of me and CTOs, etc., where this potentially presents a challenge for us, right? It's really difficult to manage multiple vendors, multiple platforms, and it requires significant investment to do so in terms of resource, skills, capabilities and things. So the only challenge that I would throw back to unbundling is to ensure that we are able to manage that on a publisher, but also an advertiser level. So the big guys can handle it, the big advertisers and the big publishers can handle it. The concern becomes for the smaller, more niche advertisers or publishers, whether or not they have the capability to be able to manage that.
Yeah, and by that you mean managing the kind of contractual agreements that you've already got in place with vendors, what that means for how long those operate, etc., the complexities of those.
Yeah, and the actual just day-to-day of running the platforms. Yeah. And, I'm sure we'll probably come on to it, but there's a huge shift in skills required here, right? So no longer can you just be an expert in a specific DSP or SSP. You need to become a solutions architect, essentially. You need to be able to pull together the right infrastructure to be able to solve a client need. And then every client need is different. Yeah. So how do you make sure that you don't create this unwieldy environment that it becomes unmanageable, and then you don't deliver what you want to deliver for your clients?
I want to draw on that in a bit more detail. Shane, do you want to jump in there? Go on.
Yeah, just a quick point. I think this is where AI can actually play a meaningful role. I know there's a lot of hype around AI, but with a very basic agent, you can provide that perspective to a media buyer into what's happening, for example, inside a curation platform to understand deal health, conflicts and targeting, stuff like that. So I absolutely take the point that there is increasing complexity, but I think genuinely AI can kind of bridge that gap potentially.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest challenge that you talked about of when advertisers and publishers work closer together, it works better. And the challenge being the more advertisers and the more publishers that work together, the bigger the resource. And that's where the AI or the agentic world that we're moving to is really the biggest unlock, that the constraint shouldn't be time and man hours of putting hands on keyboard. The constraint should be making sure you've got the best tools. And it's something that we've been kind of blown away as we've been building, things that we would have been really worried about of having to kind of do all of this kind of operational work that would have needed teams of 10 or 20 people. Suddenly, you've just got an agent that does it all for you. You kind of set it live and it's all done in the morning. And that's, I think, very early in terms of what's happening, but the workflow that will just go away because agents can do it rather than worrying about people, I think really unlocks a lot of the modular solutions that kind of will ultimately benefit advertisers and publishers working together at scale.
There's a sort of a democratization angle to that arguably as well, right? That actually what we're talking about is, where budget constraints are very real for both publishers and also maybe brands, there is an opportunity to access technology tools and solutions in a way that maybe hasn't been so accessible before.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it sort of allows us, coming back to that ad tech bloat term, I think you need to understand that in the context of where we're coming from, and this, why is this rebalancing happening? It's down to the fact that 80% of programmatic spend is sort of consolidated through 4 or 5 platforms. I think solid agents that actually give you a window into what's happening on the supply side it equates more or less to that unfair advantage almost that Google and others have had, where ultimately they've been controlling both sides and to their own advantage uniquely and not really to anyone else's.
Yeah. I want to pause on that for a second and just go back to the brand perspective here, Kush. That a couple of things that we talked about was firstly maybe the benefit to brands of also then being able to understand exactly where their media investment was going, and if they are getting better quality inventory that is more optimised towards their outcomes, they can be saying, well, exactly as Steph suggested, I'm not going to invest money here because I'm not going to reach the right audiences there, but I can invest here. So surely that is a benefit to brands theoretically from an investment point of view.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's worth also mentioning the maturity that we have come across in digital. So if you go back to Sebastian's example, you could send an email to a publisher and buy an advertising space. That has evolved drastically because now we're talking about, well, who am I actually targeting? Are they engaged? And then we bring into metrics such as viewability, attention. So we're constantly trying to define what the qualitative impact of our advertising is. So now we need to look at that and go, well, what is the pound gained for my investment? And this is where you start bringing multiple ad tech partners into that journey and the incremental gain in data. So us from the agency world, we're having to work with publishers, we're having to work with DSPs, we're working with verification partners, and now we're looking at the SSP side, because now they're working with DMPs and using new data opportunities. I was at a permissive conference early in the year. I didn't think me personally would have to involve myself with permissive. But when you look at their activity with publishers and they're also augmenting retail media data on top of that, as an agency, you have to go, well, there's a lot of interesting, cool stuff happening here that our clients need to be aware of to really tap into that. So I think that maturity journey is really key, and how we communicate that to a definitive outcome of, this is an increase in ROAS, increase in customers, and so on, is really important that we address the step-by-step process across the ad tech landscape.
And just drawing on one of the things that Aly mentioned earlier on too, it would be quite compelling, I would imagine, from a brand's point of view, to potentially have an AI solution that helps you do some of that for your customer at scale, right? Because you don't have the time to be optimising everything all the time, and ultimately that's what you want to be offering to your clients. Can you see a world where actually all of this chat that we're having about AI and potentially spelling the death of ad tech, which is maybe not exactly where we're going to end up, for all of that chat, is there a practical application? I mean, we're just seeing it perhaps from the point of view of using these technology tools. Like, here's a layer of optimization that wasn't possible a couple of years ago. Thanks to, improvements in computation power, we can now actually optimize much more refined than ever before. Can you see sort of a use and application for AI taking away some of the practical elements or the sort of manual elements of those tasks for you guys on the agency side?
So we're already looking into that. I think the technology is coming along. I think the real problem, if I'm being honest, is the fragmentation as well. So if you look at the AI tech and who the key drivers of that are, Google will keep its AI tech within its own platforms. OpenAI is looking to do the same. So the holistic alignment of that is still on the agency, I believe, for the future, where we have to independently look at each AI tool within their remit, whether that's ad tech solutions, whether that is, data solutions, etc., and try to piece that up for our clients, but also for each other as well. It's our duty to make sure that the publishers understand how we're working with other partners to enhance that offering for our clients. And again, go back to a collaborative offering rather than keep it sort of fragmented.
Yeah, fantastic. Aly, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I wonder if you could give us your opinion about the impact that this is having in general on a publisher landscape. So signal aggregation, enabling customised algorithm building. You were telling me when you were walking me through the platform that works really well for, publishers that have got lots of inventory and lots of scale and a good relationship with their customer. What impact is that having more broadly on the publishing industry, and where does it leave publishers that, have less data?
So I think the barriers before were around scale, who's got the most ad impressions on a page, or which publishers can generate the most ad impressions on a page, whereas this really moves it to quality and which publishers have the closest relationship with their consumers, where they can create or generate the best data on them. So it suddenly doesn't become we can farm out as much traffic as we can and have a single page impression from a user that you drop a cookie on and then claim attribution. It suddenly becomes publishers that build relationships with consumers, that understand them, that can build insights on them, suddenly become a lot more valuable because that becomes or will move to the currency that will drive outcomes. Whereas I showed an ad impression, I dropped a cookie, and then I claimed a sale, suddenly starts to go away. So that's a shift I see, which I think is a natural evolution of the industry, where the gaming of MFA or fraud suddenly becomes less and less valuable because they can't build these deep relationships that someone like the Telegraph can. So that's where I see the kind of next wave of media or publishers, is it's really concentrated in a smaller number of publishers with a deep relationship with their consumers.
Yeah, and producing, therefore, more usable inventory and better quality inventory for advertisers. Shane, were you going to hop in there?
Yeah, and I just think, crucially, sort of as these services and companies like Nodals sort of come online and provide that additional insight and an ability to understand signals due to the proximity that you have to media owners, what's crucial for us is now the ability to measure that effectively. No longer have we got this sort of over concentration of ad decisioning on the demand side, where you don't really understand what actually drove success. You might, of course, incorporate multiple types of signals into a decision layer, but I think with curation and with the sort of surfacing, the correct surfacing of the signal from the publisher, we now have the ability to actually track that and optimize against it.
Yeah. So Camilla and Steph, from a publisher point of view, as you mentioned earlier on, Steph, I'm sure it's the same over at the Telegraph. You've invested massively in quite sophisticated data infrastructure, right? This is your, your biggest asset. It's something that you're now building your businesses around. Is this somewhat music to your ears? Let's think about a world where maybe MFA advertising kind of goes away and sites go away, and also in an environment where lots of conversations around AI are firmly focused on the potential negative impact that it's having on quality content. But does this sort of draw us back into a world where actually, if you've got a very good relationship with and a close relationship with your customer and your consumer, and you've got really sophisticated data infrastructure, actually you've got a really compelling offering? What does it feel like?
I think so. I think anything that focuses on quality and transparency, compliantly collected data, that has to be a good thing on all sides. I think as well, we're really confident in what we've done thus far. We really know that what we do with first-party data works in terms of performance. We see up to 3 times higher on average brand uplifts where we use first-party data versus where brands don't. So I think we've got that level of confidence in what we're already doing, and if this opens up more doors, I think, absolutely, music to our ears. I think the point you made as well about data is, I think something that kind of gets missed when we're talking about data and cookies and all of those conversations have been going on for so long is there is something inherently very powerful about leveraging data in situ. I think where you're using the quality data, but then you're also in a premium environment using quality ad formats, you're not having to worry about that going anywhere else. Like all of those things come together. You're then giving the reader an amazing experience. They're having a positive relationship with the brand that they're seeing as well. There's so many good things about this that we know work, and hopefully this is just enabling that to happen at scale.
Yep. Anything else to add to that, Steph?
Nothing really to add to that. I think that's absolutely spot on. I think the focus on the benefits for the customer, it's just second to none when you actually use information about them and what they're interested in, and then having the capability to actually be able to deliver what they want to see when they want to see it.
Yeah. Feels like magic, right? We've nearly run out of time, but bear with me while I go through a couple of audience questions because these are quite interesting. To the publishers, should publishers skip SSPs and integrate directly with demand or enable more curated demand via SSP platforms that reduces DSP margins? Anyone want to take that?
I knew the Q&A would be hard.
Do you want to say something on that, Shane? Yeah, you guys can have a think about it.
So I think, the announcement this week of the reclassification of SSPs as resellers, very interesting development.
Yeah.
But I also believe strongly that, the mechanics for effective media trading between, the principles of the trade already exist. It's a question of, much like in nature, redressing that natural balance, have everyone play their role, have that sort of healthy symbiotic relationship between the platforms on the buy side and the sell side in order to facilitate in a neutral fashion as best as well. And we're not saying we have the interests of publishers inherently at heart. We exist to serve the needs of media buyers, and we will try to optimize to the outcomes that our clients want to optimize to. But equally, the same is true of Aly, on behalf of publishers performing against a KPI that perhaps a buyer might set, but you're trying to maximize the yield on the supply side. And I think that is absolutely healthy and required for a flourishing ecosystem.
Yeah, good answer. Aly, any more insights on that? What do you think about disintermediating?
If you just think about an SSP, a DSP, a publisher and an advertiser, I only think the thing that matters is transparency and the value that each is driving. So whether it's the SSP or the DSP, there's good and bad SSPs, good and bad DSPs. If you know the value that each is driving and the value they're taking, i.e. the margins they're taking, as long as publishers understand that, if it's a DSP buying directly from you and cutting out the SSP, but taking huge margins, or vice versa, it doesn't really matter as long as you see the value that's being added and the transparency. Then I don't think you should care if it's an SSP or a DSP or what's going on in the middle. Right? It's just what are you getting out of it and what is the advertiser getting out of it.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so hard to just answer that, because you can't. I can't see a world where you would need to cut out necessarily. I think it is just about the premise of a black box disappearing and having that true kind of transparency so you can see end to end exactly what is happening. And I think a big thing for us is where there are black boxes in place is that we need to have confidence and understanding as to what has happened or what is perceived to have happened to our data and how is that being packaged and vocalized at the other end, which we don't control. Which is why I think the unbundling and having these new solutions in place means that we can actually own that narrative. We can control who has access to our data. It never leaves us, and it puts us back in control of what we've worked so hard to build.
Yeah. And on that, another question that's come from the audience as well is, do we think this unbundling is actually going to reduce costs overall, or is it likely to just increase another cost or add another cost into the mix?
It has to, but cost being the wrong word, it's the value it drives versus the cost that you generate. So it can't unbundle things and make it more expensive unless it adds way more value. So I think unbundling only works to that point because there's going to be transparency, and it's kind of possible because measurement is a lot better for advertisers, data's a lot better for publishers, and so and that's really what's happening. Is if you have solutions that advertisers can measure better because they're advanced how they measure advertising to see incremental outcomes or business outcomes or whatever it is. If the uplift is more than the cost, then it's going to work. Otherwise, people won't buy it because they can see it. So transparency means that there's not really a choice. It has to add more value than the cost it takes out.
Yeah, I think that could be super powerful. Shane, go on.
I do think, though, that the cost reduction, whether it's cost reduction or added value, only happens with a redistribution of the responsibility further up or along the supply chain to the good actors who are actually acting in the interest of their clients rather than themselves.
Yeah. Okay. And so that brings me to my final question, which also draws on another audience question, which is there enough alignment, I suppose, of desired outcomes across the piece for this to happen? We could say that some of this has come, let's just put it this way. The industry has been very focused on supply path optimization for a couple of years, understandably, rightly so. There's been lots of other compromises to the advertising value chain that's made us look at how we conduct things from a technology point of view. So you could argue some of these tools and solutions are rising up as a result of that. Is there enough aligned value across the entire advertising chain to make this all stack up? So if we think about unbundling being a democratization opportunity, are we going to get to this ultimate goal where we're using good quality tech solutions, not costing us more, but understanding better, having better transparency into them, being able to support publishers' businesses as honestly and transparently as possible, and then being able to reach brands' outcomes? Are we going to be able to get there? Let's start with you, Steph, and we'll go down the line.
Yeah, so I think the big thing for me is what this will force is the true requirement to be partners throughout the whole effort, right? Because we won't want to give up our information unless we're receiving the value that we've determined that it warrants. The buyer, the advertiser at the other end won't want to pay if they can't see value in what they're getting, right? So everyone throughout that whole journey is going to have to come together so that we can solve this as a challenge together. Otherwise, the whole thing just falls apart. So I think it moves away from that old kind of negotiating sales patter and approach to this true kind of storytelling, the narrative around the value and what you can get by working with us individually, directly, or whatever it might be, that you have to all come together to partner with the tools and solutions that we have to be able to deliver the best outcome.
Kush, from your point of view?
From my point of view, it comes down to opportunity cost. So if we want to invest with certain partners and certain ad tech companies, you also have to remember that competition is very fierce. And that, as an agency, it means that we have to be agnostic how we approach that problem for our clients. But also, the transparency element is key because we're going to hold you to that. And if you fail to do that, you're sort of cut out from future instances. So we want to make sure that this relationship has the element of honesty, but also the value key elements is important. So if publishers are going to the efforts of driving their data quality up, they should be rewarded for those efforts. But also we need to make sure that those efforts are seen on the client side as well in terms of really tangible outcomes for them as well. So I think there's an opportunity there to really tie that up. But again, you have to be cooperative, otherwise you risk losing out to competitors as well.
Do you think that brands and marketers are more attuned to that now than they used to be before?
I would say so. There's definitely, if you look at AI space is a really good way to sort of represent that. The unlocking of data using AI has really brought that notion of new competition into the market. So before it was, what's the value of your placement, your environment, your brand quality, etc. Now it's going a layer deeper to that and saying, do we understand your audiences properly and can they drive value for us? So when you sort of compose all those key elements, I think they're waking up to there's several factors here they need to be paying attention to. But ultimately, it's a journey we're all on. We're constantly A/B testing and working out which partners are better, which ad tech provides better solutions. And that's where collaboratively we need to feed back and make sure we're working in the right way.
Super interesting to hear that you're getting, sort of engaged in conversations about what's been typically considered to be publisher-side tech, though, to understand what value that can offer to your clients. Camilla, what's your perspective on where this is headed?
I think, as with many things in our industry, I think it really will come down to relationships, which seems strange when you're talking about something so technical, but I think this will only come to fruition if buying behaviours change. And as you said, the buy side is almost overwhelmed with choice. There are so many things that you could test out or try with this brand, that brand. There are just so many different ways that you could approach it. So this will only happen if buyers are willing to assign budgets and test, and that will only happen if we're having conversations about it. So I think, as with so many things, I think it'll probably come down to conversation and relationships.
Yeah. Aly.
So I feel like it all starts with the advertiser and measurement. And so the trend that I've seen when I speak to brands is they kind of fall into one of two buckets. One set that is really invested in understanding measurement. So they, whether it's their own technology or using other people's, to really understand when I run media, what is the incremental uplift that I have. And there's another bucket of advertisers that haven't done that. That first bucket are really pushing the envelope of we want to do different things and understand because we can see the value. The second bucket, we can't really see the value, so why do we want to change things? So why I'm really optimistic is I do think that the tools available to brands to actually measure advertising have become way better. And the more advertisers that adopt that, that will kind of push everything down to then they will know that publishers' first-party data works really well. It may not show up on a post-impression attribution report, but we know it works really well, so we want to do more of that. And as that trend picks up speed, I think it will be pushed down throughout the chain of all the way to publishers.
And in other words, it's sort of changing the way that brands are valuing, publishers' signals, right? The idea that actually this could work for me and I could see it in my measurement outcomes as well.
Ultimately, but only the good publishers.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
Yeah. Shane?
Yeah, absolutely echo what you said, Camilla, around sort of just re-establishing relationships between buyers and sellers. And I think, and sorry to give the same answer again to a different question, but AI can absolutely help us. We've seen great progress in terms of, whether it's a machine learning algorithm on just enriching deals or helping deals be more performant. But equally, let us use AI to, grade our homework, as it were, to understand, are we actually delivering, is it an all boats rising situation for the entire supply chain? And I think, I firmly believe that it will drive change and move the needle in terms of performance, reach, and quality across the board.
Yeah. Fantastic. We've firmly run out of time now. Thank you very much, Shane, Aly, Camilla, Kush, and Steph. A round of applause, please, for my panellists. And thank you very much for coming and listening to us and also for submitting some questions. Go and have some lunch.